The one thing that has been our biggest challenge, but also our biggest success throughout the history of Project Sprout, has been that we are student-run. And to me, that seems like a simple concept. We're student-run. But I found over the past 3 years, and especially giving talks, that it's not that simple of a concept for some people. After giving a speech in Turin, Italy, to over 8,000 people, I told the whole story of Project Sprout, and I emphasized that the students were the ones who initiated it, that students made the decisions, that it was student-run. And afterwards, someone came up to me and was asking lots of questions. And at the end, he said, "So, is there an adult I can contact to get more information?" And at first, Project Sprout almost couldn't get started because it was student-run. You all know that no sane school official would let a group of kids with no adult supervision dig up a plot of land at the school grounds. But slowly and gradually, with consistence and persistence, we convinced the school board to give us access to land. I can't stress enough the power of youth. I've seen it on days when the tractor didn't show up to plow the field, and a group of friends teamed up and removed 3,500 square feet of sod by hand. I've seen it when we didn't have enough hands to move our hoop house, and the track team was running by, and they lent us a hand. I've seen it when we didn't get the first grant we applied to, that we worked on for months. And there was a moment of silence when we found out that we had been rejected. And then one girl, smiling, said, "Good, let's apply to a better grant." And most importantly, I've seen it when we've gone to other schools and given our talks and shown our videos and shown pictures of our gardens. And at each school, a group of kids have formed and started their own gardens. I've seen it all over the place, and that's why my first guideline is to trust the power of youth, always. We can't do it, us youth can't do it without you. But I promise you, you can't do it without us, and without trusting us, and without giving us real, honest responsibility. Trust the power of youth, always.
Beautiful. And I think that the bottom line of this whole movement has to be about engaging young children in this activity of planting the seeds and watching what grows, taking care of it, and picking it at that moment and having the pleasure of eating it and taking those little scraps and putting them back in the garden, the whole cycle. It's what I wanted for the Edible Schoolyard from the very beginning. I've really learned to try, it's a very Montessori education idea, which is to find what somebody can do that's extraordinary. Everyone has something extraordinary that he can do or she can do. And maybe it's building those stone walls. And maybe it's cooking an asparagus pasta. But there's something, some little art project, designing this. And if you can sort of find those talents, those hidden talents, somebody may play music. Somebody may know how to set the table. And you're sort of putting that all together. And you're creating something really that's greater than the sum of the parts.
So there's one more guideline. And it's the one that Alice and I have talked about the most. And it's the hardest one to stick by, I think. And I guess to explain it, I'm going to tell a story. So back in the fall, I don't know if you guys remember, 350 Day. It was supposed to be the biggest day of environmental action in history. And I think it was in October. And I'd been looking forward to the day for a long time. And I'd helped plan an event in my town where we'd make big 350 signs and hold them up across the street. And I was looking forward to that. But that day, which was a Saturday, was also the day that we had to put up the structure for our hoop house that we had raised money for and finally gotten all the parts and were ready to build. So I got to the garden at around 7 in the morning so that I would be done by 3 in time to go to the meeting. And it was just one of those days. It was pouring rain. It was like 40 degrees. It was the coldest day of the year so far. And we started out the day with about 25 people. But by 10 in the morning, it was down to 5. People were just shaking from the cold and had to go home. And we were missing parts, and things were breaking, and the tools weren't working because of the cold and the wet. And by 12 o'clock, we had barely even moved. We were stuck in the mud. I was knee-deep in mud. My pants had ripped because they were so wet. And by 3 o'clock, when it was time for me to go to the meeting, we weren't even close to being finished. And I stayed to finish the structure. And by 7:30, the sun was down. We had gotten out our flashlights, and there were 2 of us. And we put together the last few bolts and finished the structure for the hoop house. And I went home that night exhausted, and I just fell asleep. And I woke up the next morning, and I had tons of emails. Emails from people in my community saying, "Oh, yesterday was Great Barrington's best day. I mean, the town was truly showed its light. It was unbelievable." And emails from national or international organizations saying, "Yesterday was the biggest day in history for environmentalists," with pictures from all over the world. And emails saying, "Yesterday was the day we will all remember and tell our grandchildren." And I remember thinking how not uplifting it was to struggle in the mud, putting a bunch of pieces of metal together. And I kicked myself. I kicked myself for missing what could have been the most exciting day of my life. And some days we will be rewarded. Some days we will be patted on the back. Some days there will be audiences. Some days there will be newspaper articles. And some days people will be watching and cheering us on. But most days, we'll struggle in the mud when no one is watching. Most days, we'll argue with people about the environment or about the value of local food. And most days, it'll be cold. So, I guess looking back to that day, if I could go back at 3 o'clock and leave and go to that meeting, I wouldn't. We're now one step closer to serving food year-round in a cafeteria in Massachusetts. And I think that while everyone else is telling their grandchildren about the day that they stood up with their signs and stuff, I'll tell them about the day that I worked in the mud to put up a hoop house. So that's the last guideline. Anyone can garden when it's sunny, and when there's vegetables to pick, and tomatoes, and when it's nice, and when you're with your friends. But it's up to us, the people who came to this garden symposium, to garden in the rain. The last guideline is to garden in the rain. In the fullest sense, what that means. To work when you're tired. To stay up late to finish a grant when you just want to get in bed. To work with people that sometimes you're frustrated with. To maybe miss a vacation so that you can stay home and meet with a donor or tend to potatoes. Garden in the rain.
It's the same thing as the difference between exercise and dancing. Could be either one. And so we're learning to garden in a way that it's like dancing. It becomes, I think it's the most important value that we teach to the children, is the pleasure of work. And to have beautiful examples of people who love what they're doing. And I think you're going to find that these gardens are going to happen across the country in Boys and Girls Clubs. So, watch out.
Because that's what this weekend is about. This conference is about hatching ideas. It's about reshaping old ideas and creating new ones and sharing ideas. And so as you venture into this afternoon and into tomorrow and the next day, keep these guidelines and these best practices in mind. Because these are the guidelines that I'll tell Dylan and Lauren and the other younger students, so that 10, 20 years from now when I return to the garden, even though I won't recognize the physical garden, I'll be able to see the essence of the Project Sprout at work. And these are also the guidelines and the best practices that Alice and I put together to share with you, so that 10, 20, 30 years from now, when the kids that maybe a lot of you are teaching now have grown up, we can all look out on a world that is finally reconnected with food and the land. So thank you. And